Hi, I'm Shira Carpel.
And I'm Shayna Gaunt, and we're board-certified behavior analysts. At How to ABA, we provide practical resources, community, and support to ABA professionals. In each episode of our podcast, we will be having real conversations with real people, sharing real stories about ABA.
We'll share relevant strategies and actionable tips that will make us all better ABA practitioners. It's the ABA content you need that you're not going to learn in a textbook. Hi, everyone. Today we have Jacqueline and Jeremy, who are the director and the assistant director of Certified Behavior Health Services. And we are really looking forward to hearing more about what they do, a little bit about how they experienced, the pandemic and telehealth and all those things related to that, and the type of services that they offer. So welcome, guys.
Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
We'd love to hear a little bit about what you do. So why don't we start there?
Yes. Well, I have been working with adults since around 2010. I worked contracted with the state of Tennessee. In 2017, I started my own company as I worked with the other company, and I've slowly evolved into not only working with adults, but also developing a caseload with kids. Obviously, in a rural area, the need is a very high demand. So I brought Jacqueline on to help me, especially on the insurance and kid-related cases. So that's where we are at now. I'm the owner. Obviously, I'm also the director. I provide supervision to Jacqueline and RBTs. Jacqueline supervises RBTs. I mainly am working in Alabama and Tennessee with adults. She works mainly in Tennessee, but we also have cases coming up in Mississippi.
And you mentioned most of your work, not in a clinical setting, but in the community, in people's homes, in schools, which is like a huge, resource for the field to be able to go to where the need is, as opposed to the people coming to us. So tell us more about that.
Well, I was told a long time ago that we should go where the behaviors occur. And, financially plus that mentality, we've had to go into places like schools, which in Alabama is a little bit harder because BCBAs have already established, usually have contracts with the school. The community, that can be easy, depending on the situation. Obviously, if there's certain behaviors in the community, which I can tell you a funny story about that, it can be harder as far as de-escalation. In the home, you never know what you're going to get. But for the most part, obviously we've all worked kids. When the family's positively into it, and, you can have a little success.
Yeah, for sure. Right. So absolutely. You hear the role of the family is so crucial, that when you just mentioned, Jeremy, that, when they're on board and when they're observing, you can get amazing success. And that must be a huge advantage to be able to go to the client versus the client coming to you, is that parents are home and parents can see exactly what you're doing.
And most of our parents that I see are very grateful. Some of them do not have the resources to go to a larger city where the services are available. So for us to go to them has been a real relief for them, so that they get the services that they wouldn't get otherwise. And schools have been great to work with.
That's great. Now, you mentioned that you're in 3 different states: Tennessee, Alabama, and Mississippi. That must be a lot of traveling for you. How does it work?
Well, it is difficult. I do live in Mississippi and I live in Tennessee, so that makes it easier going back and forth between. I try to map out my days and weeks so that I'm not backtracking, going back and forth. The goal is to have train and have RBTs with our clients so that they can get, of course, more services, but we can also reach more clients and help more families. So it is difficult. It's hard, especially in the rural areas that we serve, getting from point A to point B. I just think that it's so important. I'm willing to make the sacrifice of those hours so they get the services that wouldn't have been available to them.
So servicing the population that you do service, and I can't say I spent a lot of time in Mississippi or Alabama, so I don't know much about the rural communities there. So maybe this is an assumption, but did you encounter any obstacles in, people realizing the need for ABA or why it's so beneficial? Or I don't know if it's funded or not funded, but if they had to pay for it, like, why would they want to pay for it? And then why would they follow through? Like, is there any kind of, conflict with the populations that you serve?
Well, the biggest hurdle so far was obviously these states were the last in insurance reform. So that's a start. Because of that, I lived in Alabama, and my first job was in Nashville, Tennessee, which was 2.5 hours away, and I drove there daily. Yes, I did it for 7 months.
Wow!
But I really wanted to be an ABA, so that was a driving, motivation operation for that. So that was the biggest hurdle. Now, those states have passed those laws. The next hurdle is obviously these people need to know what ABA is. And some of them have some semblance of ABAs. Some of them either had friends who may be transplants, or they've contacted a case manager and told them that we could be helpful. So, as a whole, we're still out there. However, on the flip side, because the need is so big now that they've, Medicaid is paying in Alabama, and there's such a, need for BAs, behavior analysts in this area, then we're all swamped to a point where, we all have wait lists that go 3-6 months to a year.
Wow.
There's too much need.
You talked about some of the barriers or obstacles that we encounter. Sometimes what happens, and I don't think it's just in rural communities, but what experience they have had with ABA has not always been positive. And so we have to go in and show them what it looks like and how positive it can be and how it can help them and help their families. So it can't just be, we're going to come in here and we're going to change all these behaviors. And it's got to be, you got to get the buy-in from the whole family. And sometimes that's difficult because, I grew up in rural America. Well, I say past 7 years old. So it's a very close-knit type communities. And so they're not always accepting of outsiders. So you really have to prove that, that you're trustworthy and that you're there for them.
So how do you change the perception? What are some examples of they thought, ABA was this, and how would you change that kind of perspective?
I don't go in and have this complex that I know all the answers. I work a lot of ways just like I work with my clients. I start with their strengths, and we talk about it, and we talk about things that they're willing to do and things they're not willing to do, and how they have a choice. That, they have a choice in whether I come to their home or not. So just giving them those same choices and those the same reinforcement that we give our clients, and that I like to know that I have choices and that I can trust the person, that I'm seeing. And that really helps. And it takes a lot of time. They have to see that they can trust you and see that you really mean what you say.
Sure. It's so true. It's that relationship development. And we talk about so often pairing ourselves with reinforcement with our clients, but we always forget about the stakeholders or the caregivers, right? It's like, oh, well, we go in, move out of the way, caregivers, I'm coming through and I'm going to work with your child or your adolescent or your, adult's child. And then we forget about just developing and establishing that relationship with the client and the stakeholders. So that's really great the way that you recognize that and that you're patient and saying, okay, we need to, establish this relationship.
One of the things that I really liked that the BCBA changed was, the gifts of $10 or less, because I like to give reinforcement to my families. So I'm not just giving reinforcement to my client, but hey, you did a really good job with this. And I like the way you followed through. I know it was tough for you. And then finding those things that they like, whether, it's like a cup of coffee somewhere or just some little something to put in their house. So I really like the BCB changed that so that I could do that for my families.
Yeah, it's really great. The new codes come out with that. I love that. And it's nice because you talk about cultural diversity. And, sometimes we just talk about, cultural diversity from a different country. But you're right. Like the rural U.S. is definitely a different culture than, say, downtown Manhattan. So, being able to bring in a coffee and say, here, I know that you like, this coffee shop and I stopped there on my way. Here you go. We're pairing ourselves. This is great.
One of the schools I worked at, I had brought the faculty that worked with my client, and I just brought them little color changing cups, and with a little pod, because I knew the school had the Keurig coffee maker, and they were just like, "You brought this for us?" I was like, "Yeah, you guys are really making this plan work. Without you, it wouldn't be possible."
That's awesome.
So, just makes a difference.
Yeah, for sure. And I have to know, you mentioned, driving 2.5 hours each way. I have to say, I don't know if that someone required me to drive 5 hours for my job that I would have stuck it through, especially driving across 3 states. So what made you so committed? What made you feel like I need to do this and this is the field that I need to be in?
There's a few things. I know, so one of the questions, how did I get in the field? My answer is accidentally. I went to grad school not knowing it was an ABA program.
Oops.
And, well, no, it's fine because, if you ask my undergraduate professor, conditioning is my bread and butter, and I walked away with a 4.0.
Wow.
Now, I live in Alabama, and I cannot find a decent job with a family, and I have to provide. Well, I know I have this strength. I know I need this level of income. Well, what can get me that? Well, this particular job. And I know I need the 1,500 supervision hours. So how do I get that? That's part of it. That's part of the drive. Now, the situation wasn't perfect. I had actually never done an assessment, wrote any plan when they hired me. And then for lack of a better term, they threw me to the wolves.
I think we all felt like that.
Sink or swim, right?
Sink or swim. And I started swimming as hard as I could until actually it did take a physical toll on my health. And thankfully, I was laid off from that job, and I found a job that still had some long commutes to it, but they weren't every single day. So I was able to tolerate that, and that's how I built my experience and was managed the tolerance to the drive. But the drive was obviously I knew I had a certain skill set, and I needed to provide for my family.
Right.
Yeah, and I think we all do those things in the early stages of our career, where we're just the things I did, like when I was willing to get my hours and, willing to have this job and that job kind of all pieced together. Like I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, what was
you had 3 kids under the age of 5 while you were getting your hours. I can't even, looking back, I can't even know how you did that.
Wow. Side jobs and other gigs. And, you do what you have to do, but I think, eye on the prize and eventually you get there.
So before we pressed record on this, we started talking a little bit about telehealth. Tell us now how telehealth has changed what you guys do.
Well, I personally have not been to the state of Tennessee in over a year.
Wow.
Which, obviously I was going, 4 to 5 times a week, so that's first of all, if you remove that drive time, you have more time to be productive. Because once you're in a car, obviously you can listen to podcasts like your own. You can field phone calls, which you may or may not be able to bill for. But you just have a bunch of dead time. Well, now that, say driving from where I live to Jackson, Tennessee is 2.5 hours one way. Well, now I've just freed 5 hours in a day. Well, what can you do with an extra 5 hours? Services, as far as, how they've been affected, for the most part, they haven't been affected. If you're a good BA and you have good staff who are following your plan, it doesn't matter if you're there in person or not. And for the most part, I have that. Now, there have been certain situations where new staff have came on or somebody's went rogue and I've had to address it. But as far as quality of life, I mean, I've had numerous clients actually with their behaviors go down since this started. So as far as affecting the quality of the program, it didn't affect it. Now, the only arguments I have against the telehealth is I'd rather do an assessment in person, because doing an FA over telehealth and trying to direct all the staff is not fun. Training staff and trying to make sure they're all attenuating to you through the video is not fun. But those are the two biggest barriers I ran into as far as using computers and cell phones and things like that.
So do you think that the pros outweigh the cons?
Yes, I do believe the pros outweigh the cons. I know that before the pandemic, the state of Tennessee was actually going to run a pilot program to test telehealth to see how it would affect. Well, the funny thing is right in the pandemic, we're in the pilot program. And a lot of BAs, I know, still want to use telehealth under some form or fashion. You know, what that is, obviously I don't make enough money to decide that, but I believe that, you know, unless those two circumstances or a client is in high magnitude increasing trend behaviors, then telehealth is still appropriate.
Yeah, I remember when the pandemic first started, way back when, and we all of us jumped into telehealth and learning as much as we could about it. And there were some of the things that I had never even thought of that this whole new reality made us aware of. And I think one of the things was the involvement of parents. And through telehealth, you really need somebody on the other side, whether, I don't know if it's in your case, it might be an RBT or a paraprofessional, but for some of us, it was the parents. And the parents really had to be able to observe and attend and be trained. And I think that telehealth really allowed us to expand what we do and what's most beneficial for the kids, because so often if you run a clinic, you don't really incorporate that piece. But now that we had to, it's something that we should continue to use.
Well, if you really want to know your training integrity, then have a parent sit down and try to run a program in front of you, because you'll know for sure if they really understood your program or not when you're not there in person and they're sitting in front of you.
And we can do that now.
It's nice. We can definitely do that now, right? Here, put the camera in.
And a lot of times parents were intimidated with us being inside the home. And I still find that because sometimes they feel embarrassed that I can get their child to do something they can't. And so that's why we don't treat our own children because other people's children, clients do what I need, but not so much my own at times.
Yeah. Don't come into my home. Like you don't need to do that.
No. So, and especially my husband, he doesn't like me to use he says, will you please use your powers for the good and not for the dark side?
I love that.
Like when I gave him to clean the bathroom. But they do feel embarrassment, when we're there, and they're intimidated and they withhold, they don't step in. And so it really empowers them that they're in charge. Yeah. I mean, we just see a whole new side of parents.
Yeah. For sure. You mentioned earlier about the changes to insurance were kind of more recent. How has the whole insurance funding process really affected how you practice?
Well, it's one of the things that I would like to change, especially in Tennessee. I am very skill-based. That's my strength is teaching. I was a teacher before I was a BA, and so, our kids are missing so many skills, and insurance will pay here if there's, self-interest behavior, aggression, safety. But even though they may not be communicating, they are no communication and a very low skill level, insurance doesn't always want to approve that.
Wow. Is that for all ages? Or is there different rules for early intervention?
I think early intervention is different. It's based on new rules. And with adults, it's different. But that, between the 3 and 18, 3 and 21, I think it's different.
Can you slip in, well, we're just teaching replacement behavior for negative behavior and get that funded instead?
Yes.
Loopholes to every rule, right?
Yes. Because, without teaching those skills, then we're still going to have that behavior. We just call it by things. They're supposed to be called bitextual, introverbal, things like that.
Yeah.
to make sure our client gets the services they need, and certainly justified.
Absolutely. So is insurance there paying for telehealth, and do you think they'll continue to pay for telehealth going forward?
I hope so. I think it has proven to be effective. I know Vanderbilt University Triad has a research study showing that telehealth is just as effective as being in person.
And we've seen that over the last year and a half.
Yeah, so it was really tested by fire. So people were just kind of dabbling, and then this happened, and it was a necessity. And so I think that's how it happened and exploded. And I hope we don't go backwards on that. I don't see that happening. I hope we stay where we are and keep moving forward and making it better.
So if there was one thing that, you could change about the field, would that be it? Or is there something else that you think like, wow, we really need to do better in this area?
I think it's the insurance, just pushing more for, our clients to get more services, and not just with an autism diagnosis. Also seeing that, ABA works with adults. Incorporated in my own life that, hey, you do this, and then you can get on Facebook and Snapchat. And it works in all areas of our life, whether it's our own kids, our spouse, just letting them see that it's not just when I go into a school and I'm providing their professional development, that they go, oh, we had that autism training. And I was like, oh, it's for, people with emotional and behavior disorders or distress. It's for people with eating disorders. It's for, I think I forget what the app is called, but they're using ABA strategies to help people lose weight. So drug addiction, it's in everything. That's what I want to change. I want to really expand our field so that, and that I know we see it, but so that others see it as well.
Absolutely. What about Starbucks rewards?
Yes.
It's just,
I have a gold card.
Yeah, I'd like to add to Jacqueline's answer. As a whole, I wish the field would do a nationwide campaign to reassert ourselves as who we are in modern times. I know that, and some of y'all might be aware, there was an organization who's trying to pass a bylaw revoking ABA. And there was a lot of misinformation in the letter. And some of that information dates back all the way to the 70s and 80s and things we don't even do anymore. So I really wish ABA as a whole would interject itself in a national campaign to not only let us know who we are, what we do, but what we don't do anymore.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I think that would be like a huge asset. And I think we hear so often about like the misunderstandings of ABA. Even me still today in my everyday job, I get pushback of people who think of ABA as one way and come in with these preconceived notions, and having to constantly break down those barriers of, and we were having this conversation yesterday because we don't even want to call it ABA anymore. Like ABA just has this connotation of like, I sit this child at the table and I present flashcards or whatever it is, and crying or whatever, like they're going to do it. And there's so much more to it. Like there's so much more about good teaching and using behavioral principles and understanding reinforcement that goes above and beyond what that connotation is. And I think if they come out with that brand, I'm all for it. I think that's a great idea.
Definitely.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Just for the purpose of the time, what advice would you give to newly minted BCBAs, or what's some advice that people have given to you that you'd love to pass on?
It's the same thing as when I became a teacher, that find and circle yourself with positive people and with people who are ethical in the field and who are there to help you. Just like with any field, you have those that are in it for themselves and those that are not ethical, as with teaching, police, firefighter, any service field. But find those people that you can surround yourself with that are going to be truthful to you and there to help you. I really feel like I found that with Jeremy with Certified Behavioral Health Services, that he's someone who is positive, is also very truthful, and I can grow. So I don't want someone to feed me that I'm this wonderful BA, but they can also provide that positive reinforcement that I like, but also someone that can help me grow, and to find, people like that in groups, whether it's on Facebook, a face-to-face person. That's probably one of the best things that I found when I was a new BA.
Yeah, for sure.
For me, it's not so much advice that was given to me, but basically there have been some people throughout the years who have been, we'll say, challenging to me. One of the ones that stick out in my mind is at my first job, I was told I could not have a family and have a career in ABA. And that motivated me to prove that person wrong. So some people, the negative things that said to me have thrown gasoline on a fire that just won't go out. As far as advice to anybody in the field, as far as, beyond what Jack said, and more of an academic thing. Of course, we do ABA, but I've learned that learning about medicines, physiology, medical conditions, through classes or through, looking up things when necessary clients, is imperative to know some of the other ways people are affected internally beyond just, a sensory function.
There's something in the new code about that as well. So the new ethics code says, making sure that you're checking medical first above all else, before you get into FAs. And you're right, there are things beyond behavior, right? Like there's things beyond the 4 functions. People are engaging in negative behavior because of anxiety. Ooh, it's not observable, it's not measurable, but we've got to figure out how to do that, right? People are engaging in negative behavior because they're trying to communicate something to us, and we really, really need to make sure that we're digging deeper on that, and maybe we can't see and we can't observe cramps or a headache or fatigue. But as behavior analysts, you're right, we definitely need to get better at saying, okay, there's got to be something else going on.
One of the first times I realized this is I had to explain to another behavior analyst how pain can be a reinforcer. And he didn't quite get the physiology of it. But after, of course, I explained it to him, he understood. But I would think such knowledge would be across the board, which that's my fault for assuming. But I just think that'd be a strength to the field to be able to acknowledge that.
It's almost like they need a course that's mandatory for behavior analysts in the physiology of, right?
Right.
Yeah. And I think one of the things we can all do better at is expanding our minds and understanding more people's perspectives and more cultures. And, I think that's part of what we're trying to do, and hearing from more people who practice in the field, and hearing about their experiences, because we only are so limited to the experiences that we have both personally and professionally. And I think just understanding where more people are coming from will make us all really better at what we do. So that's really the goal. So I really want to thank you both, Jeremy and Jacqueline. It was super interesting to hear about how you work and where you work, and just to meet you guys. And we say this to everyone who comes on. When we created the community, it was kind of we never imagined that we'd then be able to speak to the people who are there. So it's been super fun for us to get to know people and what they do, and we get to learn something from everybody. I love what you said, Jeremy, about, go to where the behaviors are. And I think that that's something that we should do more of. So it was a pleasure to meet you both. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much
for having us. And you're a really great resource for me. I really appreciate all that you do and the work that you put into it.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you. That's why we do it, is really to support the people who are in the field, doing the work.
Thanks you guys so much for coming on. We'll put a link for those people who are listening. We'll put a link to Certified Behavioral Health Services in our show notes as well. So go there and check them out. Thanks so much, Jeremy and Jacqueline.
All right, thank you so much.
Thanks for joining today's conversation. Wherever you get your podcast, please go and subscribe, rate and review so others can find out about us too.
For more from How to ABA, including free resources and ABA materials, visit our blog at howtoaba.com. And make sure that you're following us on social media for more practical tips and updates.